Being single is not a failure. It's a form of freedom that many are afraid to face. In a society that glorifies romantic love and measures happiness by companionship, choosing conscious solitude seems almost rebellious. But what happens when we reach a certain age and discover that silence can be wiser than an empty conversation? What happens when we realize that peace is worth more than the wrong company? At that moment, the fear of being alone becomes a gateway to something greater, emotional independence and the dignity of living in harmony with oneself. Many reach this point tired of relationships that don't add value, of giving more than they receive, or of feeling that their well-being depends on someone else. It's only natural. After 50, the soul no longer seeks fireworks but inner fire, a love that doesn't hurt, a calm that doesn't depend on others. Still, habit, guilt, or the fear of ending up alone make many repeat the same patterns without realizing that true self-love begins when we stop begging for affection. But there's one truth that changes everything. Staying single can be the wisest and most loving act of a lifetime. If this is your first time here, my name is Gabriel, and I guide those who seek serenity, healthy boundaries, and purpose in their later years. Over the years, I've seen that Stoicism offers the clearest tools to build a peace that depends on no one else. So I invite you to stay until the end, because in the last part of this video, we'll talk about the Stoic lessons that will help you not only enjoy your independence, but also recognize when a relationship is truly healthy and lasting. Let's begin. Solitude has a bad reputation, many associate it with emptiness, failure, or abandonment, but in reality, it's one of the most revealing states a person can experience. Being alone confronts you with your own voice, without distractions, without excuses, without the noise of others to justify your inner silence. It's there that you begin to discover who you are when no one is watching. In that space with no witnesses and no shared routines, truths emerge that can no longer be hidden. Fears, unfulfilled desires, wounds that still ache. And although it hurts at first, over time, solitude stops being an enemy and becomes a teacher. Learning to be alone is an art that few truly master because it requires dismantling the idea that self-worth depends on being chosen by someone else. However, when you stop needing external validation, an unfamiliar freedom arises, the freedom to like yourself without permission. Up to this point, we've seen how many confuse company with safety, but chosen solitude is not isolation, it's clarity. When you choose your own space, you also choose your peace. And from there grows a strength no relationship can give you, the certainty that you are fine on your own. I remember once, years ago, going on a silent retreat in the mountains. For several days, I spoke to no one. No phone, no watch. At first, I felt uneasy, as if the world had forgotten me. But by the third day, I began to notice something new. I could hear the wind, the rustling leaves, my own breathing. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lonely. I felt present. That experience taught me that silence is not an absence. It's a different language, one that speaks softly but tells deep truths. Stoicism teaches that the soul grows stronger when it learns to support itself. Marcus Aurelius said one must find a retreat within the mind, a place where no external circumstance can disturb one's peace. That inner retreat is cultivated precisely in moments of solitude. Every time you choose not to run away from yourself, you build that inner temple the wise spoke of, a space where you can rest without depending on anyone else. When you stop fearing solitude, something changes forever. You no longer enter a relationship out of need, but by choice. You no longer seek to fill a void, but to share fullness. And then, relationships, if they come, cease to be shelters and become shared journeys. The fear disappears, replaced by a quiet sense of autonomy and respect for one's own life. Many think solitude is the end of love, when in truth it can be its purest beginning. Because only those who have learned to love themselves without company can love without fear. Solitude teaches you to hold your heart without breaking it, to enjoy calm without having to explain it. Have you ever felt that kind of stillness? The kind that doesn't depend on the world around you, but on an inner state that no longer collapses in someone else's absence. And it's from that stillness that the next great lesson is born. Freeing ourselves from the myth of the other half, that deeply rooted idea that makes us believe we're incomplete without a partner. From there, we open a new door to emotional freedom. For most of our lives, we're taught that love means finding our other half, that we need someone to complete us. That belief, so often repeated and seemingly romantic, becomes a quiet trap. Because when you believe someone else must complete you, you start living half a life. You adapt, you justify, you settle, all to avoid feeling incomplete. But the truth is different. No one comes to complete anyone. We come to share who we already are, not to seek in another what we haven't yet found within ourselves. With that in mind, the myth of the other half is one of the deepest roots of emotional dependence. Behind that idea lies fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough on our own. But when you look at it through a Stoic lens, you realize those fears are just judgments you've allowed to define you. Epictetus taught that nothing external can make us free or enslaved, only our interpretations. And one of the most harmful interpretations is believing that happiness depends on another human being. Freeing yourself from that myth is a silent revolution, stopping the search for someone to hold you up and beginning to build your own center. It's daily work. It means learning to enjoy your own space, to make decisions without needing approval, to look at your reflection and feel pride instead of lack. There's something powerful about reaching a level of maturity where you can say, "I'm good with myself." Not because life is perfect, but because you've learned not to mistake company for worth. I often use the image of a full glass to explain this. If you're empty, anyone who comes along can pour themselves into you and take up all the space. But if you're full, if you have purpose, calm, and self-love, then what you share with someone isn't need, it's abundance. From that place, a relationship becomes a free choice, not a lifeline. How many times, without realizing it, have you looked to someone else as a refuge from facing your own emptiness? Once we understand this, the way we see relationships changes completely. They stop being contracts of dependency and become spaces for mutual growth. We no longer seek someone to save us, but someone with whom we can be even freer. That is the essence of mature love. Two whole people who choose to walk together without losing themselves. Stoicism teaches that true love doesn't bind, it liberates. That virtue lies not in possession, but in sharing without fear. Seneca said the wise love without dependence, and their affection remains even when distance or time change its form. That's only possible once we stop seeking a complement and learn to live from emotional self-sufficiency. And when that inner independence begins to blossom, something inevitable arises, the need to protect it. Because freedom must also be defended, and doing so requires clear boundaries. From this understanding emerges the next great lesson, learning that setting boundaries isn't coldness or selfishness, but one of the deepest expressions of self-love. Learning to set boundaries is one of the noblest and hardest acts of self-love. It's not about building walls, but about creating borders that protect who you are. When you don't know how to say no, you become open territory for others' expectations, and little by little, you dissolve into someone else's desires. But when you understand that respect begins with you, something quietly falls into place. Life stops hurting so much, and solitude stops being frightening. Because boundaries don't push love away, they purify it. So far, we've understood that emotional independence comes from not needing a complement. However, maintaining that independence requires clarity. Saying no isn't rejecting someone else, it's affirming yourself. Stoicism teaches that we only control our own decisions and reactions, not those of others. When you forget that, you end up exhausted, trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. Setting boundaries, then, is remembering where your power ends and where someone else's begins. And that reminder, even when painful, sets you free. I've met many people who, after leaving draining relationships, feel guilty. They think protecting themselves is selfish. But selfishness is trying to change others so you won't feel pain. Self-compassion is choosing to walk away to preserve your peace. A woman I once met told me that after years of giving in to her partner's demands, one day she simply said, "Enough." There were no fights, no shouting, just a steady silence. In that moment, she recovered something she had forgotten: her dignity. That was the first time she chose herself without apologizing. A boundary isn't a wall, it's a door with a lock, and only those who are aware of their own worth know whom to let in. Marcus Aurelius said, "We must be firm, like a rock that the waves crash against without moving it." That rock is you every time you choose calm over guilt. Every time you create healthy distance, you're practicing temperance, one of the deepest virtues of a free soul. The practice of boundaries also reveals who stays with you out of love and who was there out of convenience. Not everyone will celebrate your firmness. Some will blame you, others will leave. But those who stay are the ones who truly value you. And in that process, what seems like loss becomes purification. What wasn't love fades away, and what was real remains. Setting boundaries is also a way to heal your relationship with yourself. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you betray yourself a little. But when you act in alignment with your truth, something inside you grows stronger. It's not about being harsh, it's about being honest. Sometimes love means creating distance, even from those who couldn't or wouldn't understand you. The result of all this is a different kind of peace, steadier, calmer. You no longer need to control or justify yourself. You know that life naturally falls into place when you respect yourself. That is true emotional freedom, not needing anyone's permission to be at peace. And that freedom is built on one simple, powerful word: no. Now, if you're listening to this and feel it's time to strengthen your boundaries or start rebuilding yourself from within, I have a simple request. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and tell me your name and where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this community reaches. And if you'd like to add value, share a lesson you've learned about emotional independence, something that helped you choose yourself. I read every comment carefully and with gratitude. That said, let's get back to the topic. Because once your boundaries are firm, the next great task arrives: healing what was wounded before thinking about opening another door. When a relationship ends, we often rush to fill the void. We look for distraction, company, novelty, anything to drown out the echo of pain. But what we don't face, we repeat. What we don't heal, we carry. And so, without realizing it, we bring old wounds into new beginnings, hoping someone else will heal what only we can tend to. Healing before connecting isn't a moral rule, it's a vital necessity. It's about stopping the wheel of suffering that keeps leading us back to the same kind of story. After understanding that boundaries protect us, the next step is to look at the scars those boundaries reveal. Because behind every "I don't ever want to go through that again," there's a part of you that still hurts. Healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering without bleeding, and that takes time, silence, and deep honesty. Stoicism teaches that we can't choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we interpret it. Healing, in that sense, isn't about erasing the past, but about redefining it. It's giving pain a new meaning, turning it into wisdom. I've worked with people who, after a divorce or a loss, feel they'll never love again. That feeling is understandable. When your heart breaks, it seems impossible to imagine another bond without fear. But with the right care, wounds transform over time. Seneca said, "The serenity of the soul doesn't depend on external things, but on inner work." That serenity comes when you stop fighting what was and accept that everything had a purpose, even what hurt. Healing also means forgiving yourself, not just for what you did, but for what you allowed. Sometimes the hardest resentment isn't toward others, but toward yourself. And self-forgiveness is a deep form of reconciliation. When you can look at yourself without judgment or guilt, your heart opens again, not from naivety, but from wisdom. That's when you realize solitude isn't punishment, it's rest. I once heard a woman say, "Before, I wanted to fall in love to forget. Now, I want to heal, so I can love." That sentence holds immense maturity, because when you heal, you no longer choose out of fear of being alone. You choose for the joy of sharing your path. You no longer seek refuge, but companionship. And that's when relationships stop being repetitions of the past and become new possibilities. Healing doesn't mean shutting yourself off or losing faith in love. It means clearing the ground before planting again. It's recognizing the patterns that once hurt you and committing not to repeat them. It's an act of humility, self-care, and faith in life. And though the process may feel long, every step is worth it because it brings you closer to a fuller, freer version of yourself. And when that healing matures, something beautiful happens. Freedom stops feeling like loneliness and becomes joy. It's the moment you rediscover the pleasure of being with yourself, without fear, without hurry. From there, what comes next no longer grows from emptiness, but from wholeness. Let's now see how that discovery transforms the way we live and enjoy chosen solitude. There comes a moment in life when the silence of an empty home stops being noise and turns into melody. One day, you wake up, make your coffee without rushing, open the window, and realize that no one is waiting for you or demanding anything from you. What you once called loneliness now feels like space. And in that space, something blooms, the joy of freedom. Not the youthful kind of freedom to do whatever you want, but the mature kind, the freedom to choose from a place of peace, without fear, without guilt, and without needing anyone's approval. With that in mind, chosen freedom isn't about running away or being indifferent. It's an inner state born when self-love becomes your compass. It means being at peace with your decisions, even the ones that left you alone for a while. It means enjoying your own company, your time, your home, your routines. And that enjoyment has a depth you can only reach once you stop living to meet expectations. Stoicism explains it with remarkable clarity. The one who masters their desires is more powerful than the one who rules empires. I remember a woman I met in a reflection group. After a long, exhausting divorce, she decided to travel alone for the first time. She was scared at first, but with each passing day away from home, she discovered a version of herself she didn't know. One day, as she looked out at the sea, she told me, "I never thought I could feel so calm without having to answer to anyone." That phrase stayed with me because it captured the essence of true freedom. It's not about escaping love. It's about learning to be well without depending on it. That freedom also shows up in everyday life, choosing what to eat without negotiating, deciding who to let into your space, having control over your time and energy. When you reach that point, life becomes lighter, simpler, and paradoxically, more fulfilling. Because you realize you don't need big plans to feel alive. just the quiet certainty that you're exactly where you want to be. There's great wisdom in recognizing that not everything shared is better. Sometimes the best moments happen in solitude, reading without interruption, walking aimlessly, cooking for yourself. These aren't selfish acts, they're rituals of presence. And the more you practice them, the more you understand that happiness doesn't come from what you receive, but from the relationship you build with yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a free soul is content with truth. In daily life, that truth becomes authenticity. You no longer have to fake interest, endure empty conversations, or live according to others' expectations. You can afford the luxury of being selective, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. Freedom gives you the serenity to choose without fear of losing. And when that serenity settles in, a natural desire to simplify arises, not out of lack, but out of clarity. Because the less noise there is outside, the more you can hear what's happening within. That's why freedom isn't just something to enjoy, it's something to protect, and protecting it means learning the value of a simpler life, where everything has meaning and every silence teaches something. From here, we open another door, understanding that a simple life is not a form of renunciation, but a refuge. Maturity brings with it a longing that few people admit, the longing for peace. After decades of chasing achievements, affection, and endless responsibilities, there comes a moment when the soul just wants to breathe without hurry. And in that search for stillness, a simple life appears, not as a trend, but as a return to what truly matters. Living simply isn't about having less, it's about needing less. It's about reducing noise, unnecessary commitments, and worries that don't belong to you. Building on what we've already understood about the joy of freedom, a simple life becomes its natural extension. Because true freedom isn't only about choosing who to share your life with, it's also about choosing how you want to live it. Stoicism expressed it with striking clarity. The less you depend on external things, the more you own your peace. And in a world that constantly urges you to have more, simplifying becomes an act of serene rebellion. I've met people who, once they found themselves alone, rediscovered the value of small things: a warm cup of coffee, the smell of rain, a conversation without screens. What once went unnoticed becomes enough. And that sense of enoughness is deeply spiritual. You don't need to fill your home or your days to feel complete. It's enough to be present and grateful for what is. A simple life also frees you from the burden of appearances. You no longer need to prove anything. You don't have to justify your choices or compete with anyone. You begin to enjoy a quieter kind of beauty: your garden, your tidy table, your routine. Marcus Aurelius said that the soul becomes ill when it scatters itself among too many things. To simplify is to heal it, to return to yourself. What's remarkable is that when you start living with fewer distractions, what's essential becomes clearer. You notice who brings you peace and who doesn't, which habits sustain you and which drain you. You learn to say no without guilt, to rest without feeling useless. A simple life teaches you that peace isn't something to chase, it's something to allow. And in that allowing, a calm blooms that becomes your home. One day, a woman who had decided to move out on her own after years of living with someone told me, "My house is small, but for the first time, everything inside it feels like it's mine. The furniture, the silences, and the decisions." That sentence captures the essence of the simple refuge, because it's not about the size of the space, but the kind of energy that fills it. When your surroundings reflect your inner state, solitude stops hurting. The home becomes a temple, not of isolation, but of authenticity. There are no roles to perform there, only presence. And from that place of deep calm, something even greater arises: the ability to love without possession. Because only those who have found refuge within themselves can offer companionship without creating a cage. When you've found refuge in a simple life, love stops being a need and becomes a choice. To love without possessing is perhaps one of the highest forms of emotional freedom a human being can achieve, but also one of the hardest because it challenges centuries of habit and attachment. From a young age, we were taught that to love means to care, to protect, to share everything. And while those ideas hold beauty, they also hide a trap, confusing love with control. So far, we've understood that peace is born from detachment, from letting go of what isn't ours. The same applies to love. Stoicism teaches that nothing external truly belongs to us, not objects, not recognition, not people. Everything we love is a temporary gift. And when we learn to enjoy that gift without fear of losing it, we stop suffering ahead of time. Epictetus put it simply: when you kiss your child or your friend, remember that they are mortal, not to grieve, but to love them more deeply while they're with you. Loving without possession doesn't mean loving less, it means loving better. It means giving space, respecting the other's rhythm, understanding that everyone has their own path. It's about accompanying without demanding, listening without interrupting, and above all, not trying to change anyone. When you stop trying to mold the other person, you discover the beauty of authenticity. The relationship stops being a power struggle and becomes an encounter between two freedoms that choose each other every day. I remember a story about two people who lived together for years without formal ties. They had no papers, no shared finances, no eternal promises, but they shared something deeper: respect. Each had their own space, their own projects, their own circle of friends. And yet every night they met in the calm of knowing that the other was there by choice, not obligation. When he fell ill, she cared for him without being asked. When she wanted to travel alone, he waited for her without complaint. That is loving without possession, trusting without chaining. Seen this way, love stops being a transaction and becomes contemplation. You no longer love to receive something, you love because loving itself expands you. Love without possession doesn't hurt because it's rooted in respect and acceptance. You understand that the other person isn't yours, but a companion on a stretch of the road. And if that stretch ever ends, you can say goodbye with gratitude instead of resentment. Seneca spoke of virtue as balance, and love without possession is one of its purest expressions. It doesn't ask you to renounce affection, but to release the need to control it. In maturity, this kind of love becomes especially important because there's no time to waste on relationships that suffocate or dependencies that drain. To love without possession is to love with the awareness that every encounter is precious precisely because it's fleeting. When you reach that understanding, love becomes an extension of freedom, not its enemy. And from that free love arises a new inner strength, the ability to rebuild yourself after having loved and lost without turning pain into punishment. It's time to talk about that rebuilding because love that doesn't destroy us transforms us. There are loves that don't end. They slowly dissolve until you're left facing yourself with the hardest question: who am I when I'm no longer us? Rebuilding self-esteem after heartbreak isn't just an emotional task, it's a complete reconstruction of identity. When you've given so much that you've emptied yourself, learning to look at yourself again without fear takes patience, humility, and a lot of tenderness. But the beautiful thing is that this process, though painful, is also deeply fertile, because what's rebuilt from truth rarely breaks again. With that in mind, Stoicism offers a valuable map for this stage. It teaches that you can't control someone's departure, but you can choose how to interpret it. The person who leaves doesn't take your worth, they simply leave space for you to rediscover it. Epictetus would have put it this way: what hurts you isn't what happens, but the opinion you have about it. And if you change the way you see it, the wound itself begins to change. The breakup stops being a loss and becomes a lesson in self-love. I once met a man who, after his divorce, looked in the mirror and saw only flaws. He said he was no longer worthy of love, that he had lost his charm, his purpose, his direction. For months, he avoided anything that reminded him of his loneliness. Until one day, tired of his own sorrow, he decided to start again. He signed up for painting classes, began walking every morning, and replaced the question, "Why did they leave me?" with, "What can I learn from this?" Months later, his gaze had changed. He was still alone, yes, but he no longer felt broken. He had become his own again. Rebuilding self-esteem after heartbreak means stopping the search for answers outside yourself. External validation is like a fogged mirror. It distorts who you are. You have to clear that reflection with small daily acts of care, eating well, moving your body, resting, keeping small promises to yourself. Each consistent action becomes a brick in the rebuilding of your confidence. And little by little, without noticing, pain gives way to a new version of you, calmer, more grounded, stronger. Forgiveness is also essential, not just for the other person, but for the version of you who didn't know how to set boundaries or settled for crumbs. There's no shame in having loved with innocence. We all do. But true wisdom lies in not repeating the same mistakes once you're aware of them. When you forgive yourself, you release the energy that was trapped in resentment and turn it into understanding. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." That line captures what happens when you allow yourself to heal with compassion. The light doesn't come from outside, it arises from acceptance. And when that light enters, you no longer seek someone to illuminate you. You become your own lamp. From that clarity, heartbreak stops being an enemy and becomes a point of departure. That renewed self-esteem also redefines what love means to you. You no longer seek overwhelming emotion or endless promises. You seek serenity, consistency, and reciprocity. And to recognize those qualities, you need a clear compass, the Stoic virtues that sustain a healthy, lasting relationship. That's why the next step isn't closing your heart, but learning which virtues should guide it if you ever choose to open it again. When the wound has healed and the heart begins to open again, an inevitable question arises. How can I love without losing myself again? The answer lies in the values that sustain any healthy bond, and Stoicism offers a clear compass for that. The ancient sages knew that it's not enough to love. You must love with virtue. And virtue, in this context, isn't moral rigidity. It's coherence between what you think, feel, and do. A healthy relationship isn't built on promises, but on principles that endure over time. With that in mind, the most important Stoic pillars for a balanced relationship are temperance, justice, courage, and prudence. Temperance teaches us not to react impulsively, to listen before speaking, to respond with calm instead of ego. When a couple learns to disagree with respect, their bond grows stronger. Justice calls for fairness, to give without losing yourself, and to receive without demanding. In just love, there are no emotional debts, only agreements grounded in mutual respect. Courage, in turn, is the ability to stay true to your values, even when the relationship faces storms. Not everything can be fixed, but everything can be faced with dignity. Courage reminds you that love doesn't mean enduring the intolerable. It means having the honesty to act with integrity even when it hurts. And prudence, the quietest of all virtues, teaches discernment, to choose wisely before opening your heart, to observe actions rather than words, to recognize signs that a love-struck heart might prefer to ignore. These four virtues become filters for choice as we mature. Because choosing a partner after 50 isn't about butterflies anymore, it's about peace. The first filter is emotional serenity, someone who doesn't mistake intensity for love, who knows how to communicate without wounding. The second is respect for freedom. If someone cannot tolerate your independence, they're showing fear, not love. The third is coherence, seeing that their actions back up their words. Those who can't honor small commitments won't sustain big ones. It's also worth remembering that before seeking, it's wiser to observe, not from distrust, but from awareness. A healthy connection doesn't spring from sudden excitement, but from deep compatibility. Ask yourself, does this person help me grow or make me smaller? Do they respect my silences or fill them with their noise? The answers to those questions reveal the difference between an enriching bond and a repetition of old patterns. Stoicism teaches that loving well doesn't depend on the other person, but on the inner state from which we love. If you love yourself with serenity, you'll attract relationships that vibrate at that same frequency. Healthy love doesn't demand change, it inspires mutual evolution. And when that maturity takes root, love stops being a place of suffering and becomes a space for shared growth. In the end, true relationships aren't sustained by need, but by virtue. Two souls who choose each other with temperance and freedom can walk side by side without losing themselves. And if that path ever ends, they'll part with gratitude, not resentment. Because love, when it's wise, doesn't leave scars, it leaves wisdom. And in understanding this, a profound certainty emerges. Being single isn't a temporary state or a lack. It's a path of wisdom that, if ever shared, is enriched, but that on its own is already complete. From that fullness arises the final great lesson of this journey: maturity as an inner temple. There comes a moment in life when you no longer seek who will accompany you, but who won't disturb your peace. Maturity is that point where you stop measuring happiness by the number of relationships and start measuring it by the quality of your calm. It's the moment you understand that the most lasting love is the one you have for yourself, and that relationships, when they come, should be an extension of that fullness, not a substitute for it. Being single, then, is not a lack. It's a form of wisdom. It's the art of turning solitude into an inner temple. With everything we've explored, it's no longer about running from love, but about living it from a different place. Maturity teaches that you don't need noise to feel alive, nor eternal promises to trust. Coherence, presence, and serenity are enough. Stoicism speaks of the soul as an inner fortress that no one can invade if it's well guarded. And that protection doesn't come from fear, but from discernment. You learn to open the door with awareness and to close it without resentment. The inner temple I speak of has no walls, only habits. It's built with silence, gratitude, and conscious choices. Every healthy boundary, every time you choose not to react, every time you value truth over approval, you're raising another column in that temple. It's not a refuge to hide from the world, but a space to receive it calmly. Inside it, there's no loneliness, only companionship, your own, reconciled, and at peace. I once read that a mature soul doesn't need to prove anything. It simply lives with purpose. That phrase sums up this entire journey. Because in the end, maturity is not resignation, it's fullness. It's looking back with gratitude, even for the mistakes, and looking forward without anxiety. It's knowing that life doesn't always offer second chances, but it does offer new ways to love, to choose, to begin again. And when you reach that state, being single stops being an issue and becomes a way of being in the world. You're not defined by the absence of a partner, but by the presence of awareness. You've learned that love doesn't always mean sharing a roof. It means sharing meaning. That being alone isn't being incomplete, but being whole. And from that wholeness, if love arrives, you welcome it without fear, and if it doesn't, you're still home. That is the true victory of maturity, to stop searching for what already lives within you. Because peace isn't conquered outside, it's cultivated within. And when the soul learns that, every sunrise becomes an act of gratitude, and every silence a prayer. From that inner place, life becomes simple, deep, and complete. Throughout this journey, we've walked a path that not everyone dares to take, the path of discovering that solitude can be a teacher, that you don't need a better half, that self-love also means protecting yourself with boundaries, and that before opening another door, you must heal what's been left behind. We've talked about freedom as a mature joy, about simple living as refuge, about love without possession, and about the strength that comes from rebuilding yourself after heartbreak. And finally, about the Stoic virtues that allow you to love without losing yourself, and about maturity as an inner temple where everything quietly falls into place. These haven't just been lessons about being alone, but about being at peace with yourself and with the world. Thank you for making it this far. If you're listening to these words, it's because a part of you has already chosen to live from serenity, without fear and without dependence. I'm deeply grateful for your presence, for joining me in this reflection, and for being part of a community that seeks clarity, purpose, and emotional freedom. Every time you choose to pause a little longer, to read, to reflect, or simply to breathe before reacting, you contribute to a more conscious and compassionate world. Your presence here makes it possible to keep sharing wisdom that lights the way toward maturity and dignity. My name is Gabriel, and my purpose is to remind you that protecting your peace and your dignity isn't selfishness. It's love in its clearest form. Stoicism teaches that a serene soul isn't formed by avoiding pain, but by learning to transform it. That transformation is what we celebrate today. You've walked through 10 lessons that don't aim to change anyone else, but to strengthen the only thing you truly can, your own spirit. Now I'd like to invite you to participate. Tell me what country you're listening from, and write this phrase to seal what you've learned today. My peace depends on no one. That phrase captures the essence of this entire message. Share it with someone who may be going through a season of rebuilding or solitude, someone who needs to remember that being alone can also be an act of love. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, give this video a like, and turn on the notification bell to continue deepening this journey of wisdom and freedom. Thank you for allowing me to accompany you. May the serenity you feel today remind you that you're not incomplete. You're whole within yourself. Up next, you'll see 2 videos on screen. Choose one and continue exploring this path of growth and awareness.